The Butterfly's Dream by Kerpers 314, Chapter 8, Ultimate Weapon. Help me. He was wrong. That was the first time Ruby could honestly say that with any certainty. He was wrong that she wouldn't understand, that his words meant nothing to her, despite not knowing what he might be thinking at any given moment of the day. She knew him. They were two people separated by a cosmic lobotomy, but like a house of a brain, somehow still made up of a larger whole, right and left hand operating independently, but still able to touch one another over that infinite divide. But just like how she couldn't know his every waking thought, right now he must be wondering what was running through her mind. He must have been as apprehensive as she was, watching, waiting for something definite. So why was she just staring blankly ahead like an idiot? There was any number of things she could do to let him know how she felt, but she couldn't surpass that moment of inertia to lift a pen to her aid, because she still couldn't justify how she felt. She could understand, by golly, she couldn't understand, because she felt like she had been the one holding the blade, just like how Naruto's Kusarigama was Crescent Rose's mirror. The swift and instinctual slash was hers. The blood had filled her nostrils as plain as day, and the shroud of night as real as the desk underneath her. She was just as guilty as he was, so how could she offer him solace when she had yet to forgive herself? Ruby? She whipped around, latching onto a hand which placed itself on her shoulder. She stared bug-eyed back at the tawny stare which held such fear, such a horrible and familiar fear. She screamed, "Ruby!" The voice, insistent yet calm, steadied her, silenced her cry. Velvet, finally recognizing that those hazelnut eyes weren't the inconsolable stare of the gypsy child who lost his mother, but the distraught twilight of her most recent friend. Her voice trembled, as did her body, as she lowered herself back down into her seat. She scoped around the cafeteria only to shy away at all the gawking eyes focused on her. Ruby, the familiar stutter, was studied with urgency. Do you think you could let go of my arm?" "Oh, I'm so sorry." She instinctively released the only person with wrist as spindly as her own, gasping at the angry red bracelet she had unwittingly caused, as if she didn't have enough to feel guilty about. "Oh my gosh, Velvet, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what came over me." Yet another wave of guilt washed over her as the other woman just smiled congenially back at her, trying her best to disguise the pain flinch, which was an uncontrollable reflex. "Please, Ruby, don't worry about it." She hid the object of contention beneath the table, trying to return to her original intent. "I want to know if you're all right. You haven't said anything since school started, and just stared into space. And well, it's lunch now." She trailed off, losing the train, her her prearranged script. "I'm just a little worried, you know. You haven't acted this way for months now, and well." She didn't need to say any more. Ruby gave her first real friend a sad smile, trying to be happy she had such people who would go out of their way to notice her abnormal behavior. Just like Naruto couldn't afford to continually eschew his surroundings, neither could she, though for her it was a matter of friendship, not life and death. Well, not yet, anyway. But when she opened her mouth to address the elephant in the room, the only thing which came out was a weak choking sound. She froze once again, words caught in her throat as she hung up on that first sentence, that first syllable. "I." She what? Had a friend, a celestial voyager, who was busy having an existential crisis while she was unlearning her language skills. She shook her head. "Is Coco here today?" The fragile look of hope on the rapid fawness was carefully crushed as the girl tried to change the conversation. "No." Velvet reciprocated the gesture. "She called me yesterday to say that she would be sick." She said, however, over a fever. She was too embarrassed of her childhood friend to admit that her full message had been shopping fever. "I guess you'll just have to make do with me, huh?" "Ah, no. That wasn't what she meant to do. Why did she always have to be so casual associated with her self-destruction? Why couldn't she just crash and burn by herself? Why? Because she was never alone? No, that isn't what I meant. I. Now she was the one stuttering, mouth getting ahead of brain, and not the other way around. I screwed up. With that one utterance, it felt like a pallet of bricks had just been removed from her chest. Too bad there was still that semi-parked there with about 2 dozen more. I screwed up, she uttered again, staring down at her lap and trying not to look at her hands, lest she see them covered in blood, and I'm not sure what it means. The soft woman gave her the hardest look she was capable of, this disbelief etched on soapstone cheeks. You don't know what it means? If it makes me a bad person? Velvet blinked slowly. What happened? All trance of a stutter, her hesitance had disappeared in this most dire of situations. Once again Ruby couldn't help but envy the older woman who had her priorities clearly delineated. Ruby heaved a deep breath, unsure of where to begin, just that she had committed to say something now. What if something I did may have cost someone their life? The soapstone analogy became more appropriate as all color drained from Velvet's eyes. Ruby, are you talking about a hypothetical? They were not supposed to have their ethical studies class until the graduation year, and it didn't seem like Ruby was planning that far ahead. Do you mean that you kill? Uncle Crow says that every day, just by us living here in Patch, people give their lives protecting us. She interrupted her friend so that she didn't have to say the words out loud. She also didn't take back what she said, and so could claim honesty with herself. Even in places like Vale, with sturdy walls to protect us, huntsmen and huntresses always have to be prepared to give their lives for others. And you're feeling guilty simply for existing. The sympathetic look Velvet was giving her almost made Ruby weep. Something like that, she answered truthfully. Oh, girl. She scooted her seat closer to Ruby's and smothered her in a one-armed hug. You shouldn't be having such thoughts at your age. She wanted to protest at being babied, pointing out the minor differences in age between the two like she would be with her sister, but somehow Velvet always managed to eschew the motherly vibe, an inclination which made her ageless and seemingly naive, like Ruby, but in a different way, but in a differently way entirely. Not quite naive though, and limitlessly forgiving, which only made her want to cry more. So she did. She cried for all the times she thought she was all right, all the times that she felt she had to hold it in to keep herself, keep Naruto together. She cried tears for him too, all the ones she couldn't afford to shed, and all the ones wasted on lonely nights without a shoulder to lean on. And she cried. She listened. She You shouldn't be so quick to take the world's burdens on yourself. You're so young and have nothing to be guilty for. So, sure, you'll make mistakes as we all do. It's part of living and it's part of the life we choose. Being huntresses mean taking risks. Risks whose mistakes will cost dearly, but the reason we choose to take those risks is because there is even greater reward. Anyone can kill Grim, anyone can perish. It's something special to save a life that otherwise might not have survived. Instead of focusing on all that you can't do or fail to do, concentrate on what's ahead and what's around you right now. Lunch hour was almost over by the time she spoke, which while wiping her tear and makeup streaked face, she uttered an apology to the rabbit girl, who waved it off, citing that it was nothing. If anything, Velvet seemed happier too, having been able to successfully help someone else. She issued a silent apology to Naruto as well for making him sit in silence while she had a breakdown. She would try and explain things to him later, hopefully with more eloquence than he had been able to manage. Somehow had to be the brains in the relationship. Hey, you guys, what's happening? She had to blink twice, as for a moment she thought she had summoned the devil himself with all of his bubbly blonde glory. Nope, it was just Yang. Oh, just having a little chit chat. Velvet said conspiratorially, giving Ruby's sister a hinting wink. Oh! The ball of sunshine flickered for a moment, trying to process the fact that her sister had confided in someone else besides her when she cracked up the lights once again. That's great. What you talking about? Girl stuff? Her sister teased, trying to appear more soulless than she actually was. In truth, Ruby probably knew more than her sister by now because of Naruto shinobi lessons and extracurricular activities. Extracurricular escapades didn't keep her from blushing like her namesake every time the subject was mentioned. She and Naruto may have shared a wavelength, but she would never be as comfortable around the subject as he was. Well, maybe if she had been born in the world as a boy. Never mind, she didn't want to think about that. It was just all kinds of wrong stuff. Velvet emphasized with a little bit more seriousness pressed to her lips. Ah, Bring nuts! There's the bell. Come on, champ. See you guys later. They waved back as Velvet hopped away, molding in with the tile of upperclassmen who were headed to another set of classes, while Ruby, tucked underneath her sister's arms, meandered on to destinations unknown. Bleach class? Come on, sis. Professor McGregory isn't so bad. Nah, he ain't, but he's off for the week, and we've got a substitute. Rumor has it it's that port guy, supposed to be a big shot from Beacon, but I heard from Coco that he just drones on and on. Ruby giggled as her sister mimicked the action with a hand on and an irritable look twisted on her face. Too bad. She was beginning to like the young professor and hoped whatever kept him away was only temporary. Still, if their substitute wasn't worth listening to, she might finally try writing Naruto. She still didn't know exactly what to say to help him, but Velvet gave her a place to start. The positive effect it had on her was proof that words had potency. She was sure that they couldn't completely cleanse the boy's conscience overnight, but knowing that she was feeling the same as he was might inspire him to overcome his hypocritical ennui sooner. Funny how a letter would help rebuild something so thoroughly devastated, though it should have been expected from the pen was mightier than the sword. End of chapter 8.